Harlem, New York City. September 1951. The heat of the summer had broken, leaving behind a crisp, electric air that promised change. On a sidewalk outside a boutique on West 134th Street, a scene of ordinary grace was unfolding. May Johnson, wife of Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, was completing her afternoon rounds. At 45, she moved with an unhurried elegance that spoke of assured place. Her dress was a tailored dove gray wool, her hat a small, fashionable marvel, and on her hands were gloves of pristine white kid leather. She was not just a woman shopping, she was a pillar of a complex world, performing the visible rituals of its stability. Her driver, a man named Henry, held the door of a polished Buick Roadmaster open for her. The transaction was smooth, practiced. In this neighborhood, the Johnson name was a quiet currency, signifying not just fear but a form of brutal order and sporadic benevolence. Respect for Bumpy was reflected in the deferential nods May received from passersby, shop owners, numbers runners, grandmothers on stoops. It was an ecosystem and she was its first lady. Patrolman Michael Branigan of the 32nd Precinct watched this from across the street. At 26, Branigan possessed the uncomplicated worldview of a man who believed the world was divided into two kinds of people: those who gave orders and those who took them. His transfer to Harlem from a tightly knit Irish enclave in the Bronx had been a shock. Here, the hierarchies he understood were blurred, contested. He saw a well-dressed Negro woman treated with a deference that, in his mind, belonged only to the wives of judges or captains of industry. It lit a slow, resentful fuse within him. As May turned to give Henry a final instruction, her purse slipped from her gloved hand, spilling a few coins and a lipstick onto the pavement. It was a moment of minor human clumsiness. Henry moved to assist, but Branigan was quicker. He strode over, not to help, but to oversee. "You're causing an obstruction," he announced, his voice louder than necessary. He addressed Henry, but his eyes were on May. May looked up, her expression one of mild surprise. "It's a dropped purse, officer. Hardly an obstruction." Her tone was calm, corrective. Branigan flushed. Her lack of intimidation, the gentle chiding in her voice, was a spark to tinder. "I said it's an obstruction. Move along or I'll cite your driver." Henry stood still, his eyes flicking to May for guidance. This subtle deference, this silent acknowledgement of her authority over the officers, was the final provocation. In Branigan's mind, the badge was the ultimate symbol. Its authority was meant to be immediate, total, and met with bowed heads. "You," he said, stepping squarely into May's space. "You need to learn to listen when an officer speaks." And before the thought had even fully formed, he acted. It wasn't a punch. It was something more intimate, more degrading. With a sharp, swift backhand, he slapped the white glove clean off her right hand. The smack of leather against skin was a small, shocking report in the afternoon air. The glove landed in a patch of gutter dust. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Henry tensed, his body coiling, but a nearly imperceptible shake of May's head froze him. The street held its breath. May Johnson did not cry out. She did not cradle her hand. She looked first at the soiled glove in the dirt, then slowly raised her eyes to Branigan's face. Her gaze was not fiery with rage, but cold with a profound, assessing disappointment, as if she were examining a flawed and vulgar specimen. She said nothing. Branigan, his heart hammering with adrenaline and a sudden, creeping dread he mistook for triumph, puffed out his chest. "Now, move the car." With glacial calm, May bent at the knees, not a stoop but a dignified, deliberate motion, and retrieved her glove. She did not shake it off. She held it, soiled side up, in her bare hand. She then turned and entered the Buick without a word. Henry closed the door, his own face a mask, and drove away. Branigan watched them go, the smirk on his lips feeling forced. He had asserted himself. He had cut through the pretension. He walked back to his post, ignoring the silent, watchful eyes of the street. He didn't know her name. He told himself he didn't need to. He had the badge. It was his shield, his sword, his immutable truth. What Patrolman Michael Branigan could not comprehend was that he had not merely insulted a woman. He had violated a fundamental law of a separate sovereignty. He had challenged the reputation of a man for whom respect was the bedrock of existence, and whose reach was woven into the very fabric of the city, light and dark. By morning, the badge he worshipped would be taken from him, not by a gangster's bullet, but by the cold, meticulous machinery of the very system he believed he represented. The Buick did not return to the Johnson residence. It moved with purpose through the gathering dusk, arriving at the rear of a nondescript social club on 116th Street, an establishment known as the Grady. May's composure, ironclad on the street, did not waver as she ascended the back stairs. But the mark on her hand, a faint red line across the knuckles, was visible. Bumpy Johnson was at a large desk, studying a racing form through wire-rimmed glasses. At 47 he was a man of contained force, his intelligence as sharp and dangerous as any blade. He looked up as his wife entered. His eyes, missing nothing, took in the missing glove, the careful neutrality of her expression, the way she held her purse with both hands, one bare. He stood, a motion both smooth and deliberate. May. He did not ask if she was all right. The question would be an insult. A policeman, she said, her voice even. On 134th. He struck my hand. Knocked my glove into the gutter. She laid the soiled glove on the edge of his desk, a piece of evidence. Bumpy's expression did not change. He came around the desk and took her bare hand, his touch gentle. He examined the faint welt, his thumb tracing it once. His eyes, when he looked up, had turned the color of a winter sky. Did he know you? He did not care to know me. He saw a Negro woman who did not jump at his command. That was his entire calculus. His identifier? Branigan. Michael, I believe his partner called him. Young. Red hair. Precinct car number was 322. He is new. His arrogance has no history here. Bumpy nodded slowly. He led her to a leather armchair. Would you like a brandy? Tea, she said. He poured tea from a samovar, the domestic ritual a stark contrast to the violence of the report. The calm in the room was not absence of anger, but its total concentration. He's a policeman, Bumpy, May said, using his given name. They have their own laws. They protect their own. Bumpy placed the teacup before her. Everyone has a weakness, May. Every institution has a pressure point. A badge is a license, not a pardon. He will learn the difference. He returned to his desk chair, steepling his fingers. He took something from you in public. Something that cannot be measured in dollars. We will take something from him in return. Something he believes is priceless. He lifted the telephone receiver. His first call was not to a muscle-bound enforcer. It was to his attorney, Leonard Ross, a man with offices in the financial district and a talent for navigating the gray spaces between statute and influence. Leonard. Bumpy. An incident today. Patrolman Michael Branigan, 32nd Precinct, car 322. He publicly assaulted May. I want his life on paper. His personnel file, his financials, his family, his vices. By midnight. He listened, then replied, no. Not that. We are going to have the city itself punish him. We need to make him a toxin they are eager to purge. He hung up. The next call was to his most trusted lieutenant, a man named Silas who possessed the patience of a glacier and the precision of a watchmaker. Silas. The officer who touched May. I want a shadow. From now until it's done. Learn his patterns, his friendships, his fears. But he is not to be touched. He must feel perfectly secure until the moment the floor vanishes. The machinery was in motion. This was not the hot rage of the street. This was the cold calculus of strategic dismantling. Bumpy's power was a hybrid creature. Part illicit enterprise, part community bulwark, part political shadow. He would use every facet. He came to kneel before May's chair, an old-world gesture. He will apologize to you. Not in a shadowed room. On the street where he did it. And then he will be nothing. May placed her hand on his cheek. Just make it definitive. It will be a lesson written in city ink, he promised. Meanwhile, in a bar near the 32nd Precinct, Patrolman Michael Branigan was on his second beer, recounting the story to his partner, an older cop named Donnelly. Taught her a lesson in civics, Donnelly. They get fancy clothes, start thinking the rules don't apply. Donnelly swirled his whiskey. You get a name? For what? Another rich spade's wife. Probably married to a numbers man. So what? Donnelly gave him a long, weary look. This is Harlem, Mike. It ain't the Bronx. The lines here, they're drawn in sand and the tide comes in fast. You slapped a woman's glove off. That's an old-world insult. You might have just rang a bell you can't unring. Branigan laughed, the beer fueling his certainty. Let her husband come. I got the NYPD behind me. He went home to his studio apartment, polished his badge as was his ritual, and hung it proudly on the bedpost. It gleamed in the dim light, his talisman. He fell asleep dreaming of a detective's gold shield, utterly ignorant of the fact that silent, efficient men were already auditing his life, line by vulnerable line. The hidden city awoke. Bumpy Johnson's request was a catalyst, activating a network of favors, debts and cold professionalism. In a secure office near City Hall, Leonard Ross met with a contact deep within the Police Pension Bureau. A folder was exchanged for a sealed envelope. Inside was Branigan's service record. His transfer orders, initiated after 2 complaints of overzealous conduct in the Bronx, his mediocre fitness reports, a note about a scuffle at a bar near his old precinct that was quietly smoothed over. Simultaneously, Silas's men were at work. At the diner where Branigan took his coffee breaks, a waiter, whose cousin worked as a porter at the Grady, noted the cop's habit of skipping the check, a petty arrogance. At a tailor shop where Branigan had an unpaid bill, the proprietor was suddenly amenable to providing a detailed receipt and a statement, in return for a discreet settlement of his own lingering protection fee to a different, more volatile outfit. The most crucial discovery came from a check-cashing joint in the Bronx, where Branigan's mother lived. Silas's man, posing as an insurance adjuster, learned of a second mortgage on the house, taken out to cover Branigan's sister's medical bills. The patrolman was helping with the payments. The financial pressure was acute, a constant, quiet strain. Back at the Grady, Bumpy absorbed the reports as they filtered in. Leonard Ross presented the summary. Michael Branigan. Thin file. Ambitious but not distinguished. He's financially underwater supporting the family home. He cut corners, takes small privileges. He's not a master criminal. He's an entitled boy with a badge used to his small-time bullying going unchallenged. His weakness is his image of himself as a rising man. His fear is being exposed as a fraud, a failure. Bumpy nodded. So the badge is not just his job. It is his entire narrative, the story he tells himself about who he is. Without it, he is a debtor with a record. Precisely, Ross said. Then we shall help rewrite his story, Bumpy said. We will use the city's own bureaucracies. We will make him a liability in triplicate. First, his professional conduct. We have the witnesses to his petty graft, the unpaid meals, the strong arming of the tailor. We compile a dossier. Second, his financial instability. We purchase the second mortgage note from the bank. We become his creditor. Third, and most public, the assault on May. He turned to May, who sat listening. You will file a formal complaint. Not as May Johnson, wife of a figure. As Mrs. Ellsworth Johnson, community resident and businesswoman. We will take it to the new Civilian Complaint Review Board. We will give it to the Amsterdam News. We will frame it not as a gangster's grievance, but as a citizen's demand for accountability from a corrupt, aggressive officer. The strategy was a pincer movement. From below, they would pressure him with his own petty corruption. From above, they would apply the weight of political and public relations disaster. The NYPD, an institution perpetually sensitive to scandal, would be forced to choose between protecting one rotten apple or sacrificing him to appease community outrage and avoid the taint of a civil rights controversy. By tomorrow afternoon, Bumpy said, Captain J. P. Corrigan of the 32nd Precinct will feel heat from 3 different directions. He will have a choice, defend a problem or solve it. We shall make the solution the only rational option. The plan was set. It was clean, legal, and merciless. The slap had been a singular, stupid act of humiliation. The response would be a multi-layered, inexorable process of annihilation. September 28, 1951. Morning. Patrolman Michael Branigan began his day with a swagger that felt slightly forced. The memory of the slap was a warm ember in his chest. He reported for duty, collected his assignment, and stepped out onto his beat. The air felt different, however. The usual vibrant street noise seemed muted. Shopkeepers who normally offered a cursory nod looked through him. A group of men playing dominoes on a stoop fell silent as he passed. It wasn't fear he sensed, it was a judgmental, waiting silence. He shrugged it off as imagination. At the diner, his usual coffee was placed before him with a curtness absent of the waitress's usual banter. When he stood to leave without paying, as was his habit, the owner, a Greek man named Spiros, stepped forward. Officer. The coffee is 15 cents. Branigan blinked. Since when? Since always. The tap, it's getting long. We're a small business. Spiros's voice was firm, his eyes steady. He was no longer afraid. Flushing, Branigan tossed a quarter on the counter. Keep the change, he sneered, storming out. The first thread had been pulled. Meanwhile, in the financial district, Leonard Ross finalized the transaction. Through a series of intermediaries, a holding company purchased the second mortgage on the Branigan family home from the bank. The terms remained the same, but the owner of the debt was now a shadow entity that answered ultimately to Bumpy Johnson. At the offices of the New York Amsterdam News, May Johnson, accompanied by Ross, met with an editor. She presented a typed, notarized statement. It was a model of restrained force. It detailed the assault, identified Branigan by description and precinct number, and concluded, this was not law enforcement. It was a personal humiliation carried out under color of authority. I seek no special favor, only the equal application of the law and the protection of my civil dignity as a citizen of New York. Ross provided supplemental context. We have reason to believe this officer has a pattern of exploiting his position for personal gain. We are gathering affidavits. The editor, seeing both a righteous story and a potent weapon for the paper's advocacy, agreed to run it. The headline was drafted, Patrolman Assaults Harlem Matron, Community Leaders Demand Justice. 32nd Precinct House. 3:00 p.m. The first official tremor arrived. Captain J.P. Corrigan, a man with political aspirations, received a call from a deputy commissioner downtown. The voice was cool. Jack, we're getting preliminary murmurs about an officer of yours. Branigan. Assault complaint is being filed with the CCRB. The Amsterdam News is running it tomorrow. They're alleging a pattern of misconduct. What's the story? Corrigan's stomach tightened. Branigan? He's a new transfer. Eager. Maybe a little rough around the edges. Nothing major. It's major now, the voice replied. The mayor's office is starting to ask about community relations in Harlem. This is the kind of spark we don't need. Get ahead of it. Investigate. And be seen to investigate thoroughly. No sooner had Corrigan hung up than his desk sergeant delivered a plain manila envelope, hand-delivered by a messenger. Inside were 3 affidavits. One from Spiros, the diner owner, detailing the coerced meals, one from the tailor for the unpaid bill and intimidation, and one from a window washer who witnessed Branigan taking a bottle of whiskey from a detained speakeasy weeks prior, purportedly as evidence. It was a dossier of small, undeniable corruptions. Not enough for prison, but more than enough to end a career. And it was delivered to him, not to internal affairs. A message, you handle it or we will, and it will be Messier. Corrigan felt the walls closing in. He had a problematic officer who was now attracting heat from the community, the press, the brass, and some unknown party with disturbingly good intelligence. The path of least resistance, the only path that led to his own survival, became glaringly clear. He sent 2 sergeants to find Branigan and bring him in. The 32nd Precinct interrogation room was a bleak, green-walled cube. Branigan sat, still in uniform, confused and growing angry. Captain Corrigan entered, holding the manila envelope. Branigan. You want to tell me about your afternoon yesterday? On 134th. Relief flooded Branigan. This was about the slap. A simple complaint. Sir, it was a minor incident. A woman was obstructing the sidewalk, being disrespectful. I applied minimal force to correct the situation. Minimal force. Corrigan's voice was flat. He dropped the first affidavit on the table. This says you slapped a glove off her hand. A deliberate, insulting act. Not an arrest procedure. An insult. She was, Branigan began. Corrigan cut him off, dropping the second and third affidavits. What about the $15 in unpaid meals at Spiros's diner? The $30 tailor bill you threatened your way out of? The bottle of Canadian Club from the raid on September 10th. Branigan's face went white. The petty corruptions he'd considered perks of the job, invisible, were laid out in stark, notarized type. Those are lies, sir. They're trying to smear me because of yesterday. Who is they, officer? Corrigan leaned in. The Greek diner owner? The Jewish tailor? The Negro window washer? They all coordinated to lie about your free coffee and a bottle of booze. He slammed his hand on the table. You're not being set up by a conspiracy, Branigan. You're being exposed for being a cheap, arrogant thief who hides behind a badge. The door opened and the desk sergeant leaned in. Captain, call for you. It's the Amsterdam News. They're verifying details for tomorrow's front page. They have the assault complaint and are asking for comment on wider patterns of misconduct. Corrigan looked at Branigan with pure contempt. Front page. You're a front page problem. He took a deep breath, making a show of weary decision. I am suspending you effective immediately. Hand over your shield and your weapon. You are to leave this precinct and not return until summoned by internal affairs. You are not to speak to anyone, especially the press. Is that clear? The words suspending and shield hit Branigan like physical blows. The room seemed to tilt. My mother, the house payments. Should have thought of that before you decided to dine and dash on the city's dime. Corrigan said coldly. Get out. Minutes later, Branigan stood in an alley behind the precinct, still in his uniform but feeling naked, the tunic empty where the badge and gun had been. The world had inverted. The fortress had ejected him. That evening at a payphone he called his uncle, a retired cop. Uncle Pat, I need help. They're railroading me over nothing. After listening, his uncle's voice was grim. Michael, listen to me. The woman you slapped? That's May Johnson. Bumpy Johnson's wife. He's not a street thug. He's a corporation. He owns politicians. He owns lawyers. And right now, from what you're telling me, he owns every mistake you ever made. They're not going to break your legs. They're going to break your life. Take the suspension. Hope it stops there. The phone clicked dead. Branigan slumped against the booth. The name Bumpy Johnson finally landed with its true gargantuan weight. This wasn't about a slap. It was about touching the untouchable. And the retaliation wasn't a bullet. It was a erasure. September 29th. The Amsterdam News hit the stands. The story was not sensationalized. Its power was in its facts. A respectable woman assaulted. An officer with a suspicious pattern. The police department's response questioned. At police headquarters, the pressure mounted. The CCRB complaint was formally logged. The NAACP, alerted by the news story, issued a statement calling for a transparent investigation. In Captain Corrigan's office, the internal decision was made with chilling speed. The dossier of petty corruption, combined with the public scandal of the assault, made Branigan a terminal liability. The goal was no longer investigation but containment. A hearing was convened, a formality. Branigan, shabby in a borrowed suit, stood before a precinct disciplinary board. His union representative offered a weak defense, but the evidence, the affidavits, the news clipping, was unassailable. The testimony from Spiros and the tailor was damning in its mundane specificity. The ruling was swift: dismissal for conduct unbecoming an officer and moral turpitude. His service was terminated. His badge number would be recycled. The process took less than an hour. Branigan was escorted to his locker, emptied his belongings into a cardboard box under watchful eyes, and was led out the back door. He stood on the street, a civilian, the box in his arms. The structure of his life, the job, the identity, the future, was gone. But Bumpy Johnson's calculus required one more step. The insult had been public. The correction must be equally visible. A call was made to Branigan's boarding house. The message was simple: tomorrow, 10 a.m. The corner of 134th and Lenox. You will return the glove you soiled. You will offer an apology. Your attendance is the final payment on your debt. Branigan, sitting on his narrow bed, stared at the soiled white glove he had kept as a perverse trophy. He understood. This was the sentencing. Refusal was not an option. The men who could gather affidavits and purchase mortgage notes could do far, far worse. His spirit, already broken, crumbled to dust. 134th Street and Lenox Avenue. 9:55 a.m. September 30th. The corner hummed with ordinary life, but there were extra players in the scene. Silas stood near a newsstand. Leonard Ross observed from a parked car. A few other impassive men were positioned at strategic points. It was an audience of consequence. At precisely 10 a.m., the black Buick Roadmaster glided to the curb. Henry stepped out and opened the rear door. May Johnson emerged. She wore a navy blue suit and a new pair of white gloves. She stood calmly waiting. From the downtown direction, Michael Branigan approached. He seemed to have aged a decade. His suit was rumpled, his face pale and haunted. He carried the soiled white glove in his trembling hand. The walk to where May stood was a march to the gallows. He stopped before her, eyes fixed on the pavement. The words choked in his throat. Silas took one quiet step forward, a silent prompt. Branigan's head jerked up. He looked at May, then past her, at the expressionless men surrounding them. He understood the theater of it. Mrs. Johnson, he rasped, forcing the words out. I apologize. For my conduct. It was disgraceful. I was wrong. He extended the dirty glove, his arm shaking. May did not move to accept it immediately. She let the inadequate words hang in the autumn air, let the moment stretch until it became its own punishment. Finally she gave a single, slow nod. She took the proffered glove between her thumb and forefinger, as if handling something contaminated, and placed it in her purse. Your apology is heard, she said, her voice clear and carrying. But apologies are echoes. They do not rebuild what was broken. You are no longer a police officer. You will leave Harlem. You will not return. If you are seen here again, there will be no conversation. Do you understand? It was a decree of banishment, delivered with the finality of a judge. Branigan could only nod, a jerky, pathetic motion. You may go, she said, turning her head away, dismissing him from her world. Branigan turned and stumbled toward the subway entrance, his shoulders hunched, fleeing the scene of his total defeat. He did not look back. May watched him for a brief moment, then turned and re-entered the Buick. As the car pulled away, she let out a long, slow breath. It's finished, she said, more to herself than to Henry. The Grady Club. 11:00 a.m. Bumpy was at his desk. Silas entered and gave a slight nod. It's done. He's gone. He won't be back. Bumpy stood and embraced May as she entered. Are you satisfied? It is complete, she said. Leonard Ross arrived moments later. He placed a small heavy object on Bumpy's desk. It was a police shield. Badge number 1894. Michael Branigan's badge. It had been acquired from a clerk in the property division, a transaction involving no violence, only cash. Bumpy picked it up, feeling its weight. He thought this was power, he said quietly. It was only a token. Real power is making the system that issued this token take it back. He dropped the badge into his desk drawer. It landed with a dull, final thud. The lesson was inscribed. In under 72 hours, a man's career, his standing, his very identity had been dismantled using the levers of law, finance, and public opinion. The message was sent to every corner of Harlem and every precinct house. Insult Bumpy Johnson's family, and you are not fighting a man. You are fighting the city itself, and it will discard you to preserve its own peace. Michael Branigan faded into a gray anonymity. The dismissal barred him from any public service job. The holding company that owned his mother's mortgage called in the note, forcing a sale at a loss. He found work as a night watchman in a warehouse in New Jersey, a broken man who drank his pay and never spoke of his past. His name became shorthand in certain NYPD circles for catastrophic overreach. For the NYPD, the incident was a quiet watershed. While brutality and racism remained rampant, the Branigan case demonstrated that the old, casual humiliations could now carry an unpredictable and severe cost. Memos about community sensitivity began to circulate with slightly more urgency. The CCRB, though still weak, gained a shred of credibility from the victory. In Harlem, the story entered legend. You hear about the cop who slapped Mrs. Johnson's glove? By morning his badge was gone. It was told not as a tale of Bumpy's criminal might, but of his formidable intelligence and reach. It was a story about a community that, through a specific and ruthless protector, could fight back and win using the system's own tools. It bred a fierce, complicated pride. For Bumpy and May Johnson, it reinforced the inviolable border around their personal dignity. No cop, rival, or businessman would ever knowingly slight May again. The lesson was cost-effective and permanent. Bumpy kept the badge in his drawer, a cold paperweight, a reminder that the most devastating power often resides in the ability to manipulate perception, law, and consequence without ever throwing a punch. The 1951 incident was a blueprint. It proved that in the evolving landscape of urban America, social power could be as potent as physical force. When Bumpy Johnson later orchestrated the ruin of the wealthy racist Charles Peton in 1964, he was executing a more elaborate version of the same playbook. Identify the pillars of a man's world, financial, social, legal, and apply precise, simultaneous pressure until the edifice collapses. The slap of the glove was, in the end, a catalyst. It revealed that the old order of unchallenged authority was fracturing. A new equation was being written, one where respect, once demanded through fear alone, could now be enforced through a sophisticated understanding of the interconnected machinery of the city itself. Branigan lost his badge not because Bumpy was a better gangster, but because Bumpy was a better strategist, a better banker, and a better politician. He demonstrated that in the modern world, true sovereignty lies not in defying the system, but in understanding and manipulating it so completely that it willingly does your bidding.